The aeromedical factors that we talked about today can really sneak up on you if you're not paying attention. You go to the Caribbean on vacation, you're going to go scuba diving before you go back for your flight the next day. Why is that not such a good idea?
If the exhaust fractures, it could bleed carbon monoxide into the fresh air.
Why is it dangerous to fly fatigued?
If you're dealing with something else, then you're not fully dealing with your airplane.
It happens so quickly. Tip of their wing was 3 feet on top of our wing. I wouldn't be here today.
That's not really this chapter though, is it?
At what altitude does the FAA recommend that you use supplemental oxygen?
10,000 during the day and 5,000 at night.
What is it called when the body doesn't have enough oxygen?
Hypoxia.
It attacks the ability of the body to carry oxygen properly. 1 ounce of alcohol is the equivalent to being 2,000 feet higher in altitude.
I have to do this. It's going to take me however long it takes me. That's just how it has to be.
And the bad thing is that your brain, when you don't sleep, tricks you. So it doesn't really have the ability to tell you that you're underperforming. It's better to get fired because you said no to go for a flight than to never come back
die.
from a flight.
Haze and fog make objects appear further away than they actually are.
Don't cheat. That's the one place where you don't want to cheat.
You're only cheating yourself.
And welcome to another episode of FNG, the Flying New Guy, where we cover the aviation topics that you need to know to become a pilot. And as always, Jason is here with us. He's a student pilot, and today we are testing his knowledge on aeromedical factors. Now, this is not just about passing the FAA exam. We want to make sure that you know all the things that are going to affect you as you go for your flight in the airplane. Now, the first time that you fly on a really hazy day or in a dark night, it can actually be a real shock. So it's so easy to get disoriented, but we'll talk about all these topics. And if you're not really feeling 100% before you go for your flight, then you can really get yourself into some sort of trouble. Jason, are you fit to fly today, right now?
Think so.
Yeah? How would you know?
IMSAFE Checklist?
I'm safe. Okay.
That's not really this chapter though, is it?
No, it's not the same checklist. Well, it's not the same chapter. We talk about that in a future chapter, but it still is very much appropriate.
Yes.
What's IMSAFE? What does that stand for?
It's an acronym. It's what? Illness. Medication.
Medication.
A is alcohol. F is fatigue.
S is the one that you don't get because you go home and you just play video games.
Oh, stress. Yeah, you're right. I don't get stress.
Fatigue, and then what's the last E?
E is it external pressures?
Eating. Which you don't do either.
Which I don't do either. So,
yep. So let's do them again. First one, I.
Illness. Medication. Stress. Alcohol, which I don't do either.
Yep.
Fatigue. And then eating.
Eating, they do both. They do eating or emotion,
okay,
which I think is good on both sides. Not eating can lead to being hangry, which is emotion, right?
Yeah.
So let's get started. We're going to talk about each of those kind of individually. Let's start with illness. You wake up in the morning, you're fuzzy, you don't feel about normal.
Okay.
And maybe you have a head cold, some congestion.
Okay.
Nothing really super major, but just not feeling 100%. Would you go fly?
No.
Why not?
Personally, that's a minimum for me. Like
yeah.
even drones, I don't fly them if I feel like crap.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not 100%, then I'm not 100% and I'm not fit to fly. But the congestion can be a serious problem if you increase in altitude. So
yep.
Your pressure in your body would not equalize necessarily as quickly as you want it to, and that can lead to extremely painful headaches and you said about the skydiver and a sinus rupture.
Yes.
I told my wife about it. She's a nurse, and she was like, I'm looking that up.
Yep.
So, yeah.
It happens. It does happen. So let's say that you're flying up, you're at 5,000 feet, you decided to go because maybe you weren't feeling that bad, but you decided to go, and then in the middle of the flight, something happens, you start to get a headache, and you start to feel it. Maybe your ears start hurting. What is happening?
The pressure in your sinuses and in your head basically are higher than barometric pressure.
Yeah.
Basically.
So
it's all getting clogged in there.
It's getting clogged. So there are really two scenarios. There is one scenario where you're sick, which the first one we mentioned, you're sick, you decide to take off. What happens to the pressure differential and why does it hurt? If you decide to go after you've gotten congested.
I don't remember exactly what the tubes are called.
Oh, the eustachian tube.
Eustachian tube.
Yep.
They're kind of the intermediary, right, between your sinuses and where your sinuses are going to drain out.
Almost.
Your
ear and your throat.
Ear and your throat.
Yes. If that's clogged, then you have air that's trapped behind the eardrum. And that is trapped from here to behind the eardrum. And now all of a sudden,
you're overpressuring it, basically.
that pressure is in here. And as you start climbing, then that pressure stays the same. The pressure decreases outside. It's like expanding a balloon, and it's going to push on your eardrum towards the outside, which can lead to eardrum rupture and things like that. Pretty painful.
Yeah.
Pretty painful. The other scenario is what I was getting to, which is we are flying at altitude and all of a sudden you get congested. Maybe it's a long flight commercially and you get congested during the flight because you caught something, a day before. And then now it's the opposite. We have low pressure in your ear. And then as you start to descend, the pressure from the outside is pushing against the eardrum. And that's even more painful. I did it once as a flight instructor a long time ago. Decided to go because I needed the money and I was whatever. And boy, I will never do it again. It is so painful. Your eardrums, you feel like they're going to explode. So I don't recommend it. What would be something that you can try to do to fix that in flight?
Equalize the pressure.
Yeah. How?
Pinch your nose and blow, basically.
You know what that's called?
No. Equalizing the pressure.
Yeah, it's the Valsalva procedure. I think it might be a scuba diving term. I don't know actually for sure. But it's something that you do with scuba diving and just diving in general. Also, what else can you do? This is something that we can do to young kids. If you have young kids that are flying and they start screaming, probably is because they have air trapped in their ears and it hurts. Chewing is a good thing you can do.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yep, the jaw and moves the whole area here. So you wanna be careful with that. So another solution, you don't feel good in the morning, take some cold medication. Why not?
Because you're medicating yourself and that can affect how your body reacts to it. So
yeah. So drowsiness.
Yep. Drowsiness or, some medications has like do not operate heavy machinery on it. That's
yes.
Same idea, right?
That's a big no-no. Every time it says that you can't do
even though it's potentially over the counter, like an antihistamine or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Is there a list that you can look and see if that medication is acceptable?
I don't know, actually.
Yeah, there is. So the FAA has a website where you can see medication, and it's not like going to be every brand, but it's going to be the components of the medication that's going to help you. So I would definitely recommend looking at that. If you're not sure, call your AME and say, can I fly with this? They will know. They'll be able to give you guidance, especially if it's a long-term treatment. But yeah, in general, you got to be careful. There's a bit of there's a wait time rule, which is that you should wait at least 5 times the medication half-life before flying. So let's talk about stress next. You had a bad day, frustrating day. You're feeling pretty stressed about money, school, relationship, work, whatever it is, and you've got a flight scheduled that evening. What are the risks associated with this?
If you're dealing with something else, then you're not fully dealing with your airplane. You may be invested in it, but you're not fully invested because your conscience is elsewhere.
Yep.
So you're not paying attention to potentially what you should be paying attention to.
This happened to me not very long ago and just had a lot going on. And I was staring at my screen, just staring at my screen, found myself, I needed to work on this one specific thing. And I was just staring at the screen, not being able to get anything out of it. And if that happens in flight, you just staring when you need to be reactive. You find yourself not being there.
Proactive.
Yeah, or proactive. You need to be proactive. You find yourself being reactive.
Yeah.
Yes, that's not a good thing. Being worried about the money, personal issues is one type of what we call the stress psychological factor. What are other causes that can lead to that? Causes of stress.
Causes of stress?
Yep. So psychological is one of them.
And some sort of event or emergency induced as well could be a major, cause of stress or an emergency or something like that.
An emergency. So in flight, yeah, noises going on around you can create a lot of stress, right? Remember, we interviewed this guy not too long ago for the channel, and he talked about all the noise that was going on during his emergency. He had an engine fire, and we'll be posting that video. Yeah, an engine fire went into the cockpit and a lot of stress. And he said at the end when he landed that all of a sudden the stress was gone because it became so quiet. Everything was just super noisy and then it became super quiet. So the environment has a lot to do with it. Heat, cold, all these things can actually have an effect as well. Vibrations in the airplane, all of that adds, time and time and time. That's why if you drive in a car that doesn't have really good noise insulation, you drive for 8 hours, you're going to be way more tired, way more affected than if your car has a nice environment, comfortable environment. So, and then what about nutrition?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It can also cause some issues, dehydration and all of that. So all of these stressors that we just mentioned, they're kind of short term. You go home, you rehydrate, you get warmer, you whatever it is, and then you're fine. What about long-term stress? Do you know the technical term for these two types of stresses?
Yes, I do, but it's hot seat and acute stress and
Acute
chronic.
stress
That's
and
it.
chronic stress. So what's acute stress?
Acute stress is short term or early onset.
Yep. And then chronic would be
Long term.
long-term. What can cause chronic stress?
I mean, not sleeping
Not
multiple
sleeping.
days in a row,
Yep.
or financial issues or relationship issues that are long term, or issues that aren't a day or two, fairly quickly fixed.
Yep. How do people fix that? Because
You need to get professional help.
You need to get professional help. I think this is really one of the factors that type A personality, which is a lot of pilots, get them in trouble because they don't deal with these issues. And I think with the FAA spending more time on mental health and helping pilots, it's up to us to really emphasize on this, us as pilots, to go and take these steps. And I know it's difficult because of all the possible consequences to your medical certificate and things like that. And that's what the FAA is working on. I just watched a presentation at the NAFI summit on that, where they were talking about how they're trying to change the culture. And I think it's a big culture thing. But yes, professional help, absolutely the answer in this case. How would you manage stress before flying? What are some tips?
Make sure you're hydrated.
Yeah.
Make sure you've eaten.
Yeah. What is that part of all doing all these things?
Just taking care of yourself.
Yes, self-assessment. Before you go for your flight, think about what state of mind you're in. And you know better than anyone. So, what do you do? You can talk to your instructor as well, if need be, to say, hey, just not feeling it today.
Yeah.
And then let's cancel the flight, maybe do a ground lesson instead or something different. Okay, let's talk about alcohol. I know you don't drink, but just like stress, some people cope with stress using alcohol, which is not good, but that's the A in the IMSAFE checklist. So let's say that a pilot that had a rough day and they decide to have a couple drinks to relax, even though they're flying the next morning. Is that actually legal?
As long as they're 8 hours bottle to throttle and not under the influence of alcohol, then you can drink.
Not under the influence. So what's the other number? 8 hours?
And then 0.04.
0.04 of blood alcohol content.
Blood alcohol content.
So you can still be technically under the influence if you're hungover, not be over the number,
right?
But still be under the influence. So not recommended. What does alcohol actually do to the body that makes it so bad that we have hangover or all these things?
Well, the hangover is caused by dehydration.
Yes.
Right? I think you called it a diuretic.
Diuretic, yep. Like coffee also is, yep.
Yep.
We'll get to that when we talk about hypoxia, but it attacks the ability of the body to carry oxygen properly. I think I've told you that story. Maybe I think it's in a course where a guy goes on a flight and had a few drinks, but is not fully impaired. But as soon as you get to altitude, all of a sudden it hits you, right? And we live at altitude, and it's kind of known that if you drink the normal amount that you would at sea level and you come up here, we've had guests get in trouble for this, and it doesn't take much, but yeah, it does affect your ability to do that. So it's almost like a little hypoxia. I don't know if that's exactly what happens in the body, but I always think about it like hypoxia.
Interesting.
So that person get in trouble because they get in the flight, they're hungover afterwards, they have no idea what happened. They made a fool of themselves because they were drunk at altitude when they weren't even drunk on the ground. So that's why they will refuse you access to the airplane if you are intoxicated, because
you're just going to get worse.
It's going to get worse. Yeah. So let's say that this pilot waits the full 8 hours. Are they ready to go?
No, if they're not hungover and they're not.
Yeah, same thing. It's decision making, right? It affects everybody differently. So we got to make sure that, personally, always 12 hours for me, but I also don't really drink that much anymore. So it's never really an issue. If I know I'm flying the next day, I'm definitely not drinking at all. But that's, as you mature, I think those things happen. So the F is fatigue in the checklist. Why is it dangerous to fly fatigued?
It's like flying drunk. You're not making the best decisions. You're not thinking things through. You're exhausted.
Yep. how does that affect flying abilities? What's one of the things that it does, like being drunk?
Slows your decision making and your reactions.
Yeah, and poor decision making as well because you're slowing down.
Mhm.
And we just posted a video, actually. Maybe we can put a link up here to an accident case study where fatigue was a big part of
Mhm.
the issue, we think. So does the NTSB. So yeah, in this case, sleep, right?
Yep,
Sleep it off. Over the years, I've done a lot of studying on sleeping. It's always fascinated me, but more so about the effect that it has on performance. And I've tested it on myself on purpose or not on purpose over time. When you have kids, when you have days where you just have to work extra and you don't get to sleep as much.
Mhm.
And it's amazing, the amount of performance loss.
Yes.
If you sleep well on a regular basis and all of a sudden you have a couple of days where you don't, the whole psychology around sleeping is just absolutely amazing. So make it a point to sleep well. It will literally change your life and change the way you operate. And the bad thing is that your brain, when you don't sleep, tricks you because it doesn't know any better. So it doesn't really have the ability to tell you that you're underperforming, even though you are. And so there's not like all these signals that are being sent. It's just kind of amazing. So fatigue is not just about having a bad night, right? You slept 5 hours last night. You wake up the next day, you can probably perform about right.
Yeah.
In some cases, even sleeping right doesn't fix it and you're still fatigued. Can you talk about maybe the different types of fatigue that we talk about in the course?
We've got just like the stress,
Yep.
acute and chronic. So
Chronic fatigue can come from what?
tons of different things.
Yeah.
I mean,
I mentioned a couple in the course.
yeah, one of them that I remember you mentioned is illness or allergic reactions to stuff.
Yeah, sickle cell anemia. The shape of your red blood cells is messed up, and
Right.
so your body doesn't have the ability to transport oxygen correctly. So it just leads to reduced performance, which long-term fatigue. Stress, we talked about it, can lead
Stress.
to that. Being burnt out, being overloaded, all of that just leads to fatigue. This is important in flight training. You're going to be in flight training. Some students fly 5 days a week. After a while, plus classwork, plus study, plus life, plus everything else, it does add up to mental overload, to burnout. I remember doing instrument training, and just after an hour and a half, there's just so much going on that you come back and you're done. Your brain can't
fried.
function. Yeah, you're brain fried. So all these things we really have to be careful. All right, last items on the checklist is eating, emotion, depending on how you want to look at it. It's the morning of a cross-country flight. I have some good story about that. And you're running late. Now you skip breakfast to get to the airport on time. What do you think is going to happen?
If you're malnourished, you're not operating at 100% either.
Yep.
So going to affect your decision making and your reaction times and
dehydration. We talked about it. Low blood sugar, more than likely. This will also affect your brain functions. And then long flights just require you have that nourishment. So I have a couple bars in my flight bag that I take with me, just stuff that doesn't expire ish. I get to eat them anyway before that happens. But yeah, always on the long flight, I always take a snack just in case, because you can start to feel it. I've exercised enough in my life that I know when I start to get that dip, and then when you start to not perform nearly as well. But yeah, I had a flight where I did that. I went hungry into the flight, and it was just horrible. Just wasted whatever it was, $150 for the flight at the time, because my brain couldn't process the information. I was behind the airplane. It was just, and then never did that again. Another question here, good one. You hit traffic on the way to the airport, and now you're running even more late. You're worried that you'll have to rush through the pre-flight to depart on time. How will that anxiety affect your performance?
It's going to decrease your performance. It's also going to make you more likely to trick yourself into thinking something's good when it's probably not. Both of those are not good things.
Yep. How do you fix that?
You need to be able to tell yourself it doesn't matter when I get off the ground. It's self-control to a point, You
need to be able to adjust.
I have to do this. It's going to take me however long it takes me. That's just how it has to be.
And this will happen. Dispatch is not going to have the airplane ready on time for you. And then you get it late, and then your instructor is right there looking at their watch. It's like, I'm not getting paid until we get in the airplane. So those external pressures are going to you're going to feel them, no doubt. So you have to be very careful. Some of the pilots use the E in the IMSAFE to consider external pressures. I just mentioned external pressures. How might the pressure to complete the cross-country flight affect your decision making? Can you talk about maybe one of the famous thing that we talk about all the time in accidents? One of the famous external pressures.
Get-there-itis from a client or a boss or
even
whatever.
Yourself.
Yeah, even yourself. I mean, absolutely.
I had friends that were at the airlines that would say they had a baby, just want to be home, right?
Yeah.
You want to be home with the family, get-there-itis. So your decision-making changes a lot.
Yeah, to try to facilitate that, I want to be elsewhere doing something else.
Mm-hmm. How many of the accident case studies that we've done was get-there-itis a factor?
Oh, I think every single one of them.
Every single one.
Yep.
This last one was an example too.
Mm-hmm.
Bad weather outside.
We're going to go anyway.
And then he had not slept for 17 hours and there was a client and they had to go. So external pressures from the client as well are going to be important. It's better to get fired because you said no to go for a flight than to never come back from a flight. Yeah. So even if you have any of these factors, one of the IMSAFE factors in here, you got to stop and ask yourself, am I ready to go and operate this airplane?
Yeah, and it's probably not worth the risk.
It's probably not worth the risk. And that's the difference between a good pilot and then a bad pilot, I guess, if you want to call it that, is just when you know that you need to ground the airplane and just not go and stay home, basically. Let's talk about some in-flight factors now. We've done the IMSAFE, we go and fly. But once you're up in the air, there's a lot of aeromedical factors that can actually affect you. Our bodies are just not really designed to be in the air. That's probably why we'd never get wings, right?
Right.
Let's talk about the way that the body orients itself and knows in which position it's in. So most of the time, knowing which way is up is fairly easy. We just basically look outside. But at night or low visibility, that's not always the case. And then our senses can actually trick us. How does our body normally orient itself based on movement?
It's in your ears, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've got little hairs, basically, and a fluid that moves around those little hairs.
Mm-hmm.
As you move, those little hairs move, and that tells your brain kind of, hey, you're leaning, you're, bending over, you're whatever.
You know the name of that system?
No.
It's the vestibular system.
Vestibular
system. So that's your inner ear that helps with the balance. And like you said, the little liquid and everything in here. And then there's one that senses when we accelerate, decelerate, right? That's called the somatosensory system. And then there's the last one, which is the most obvious one that we use every single day. That's right.
Your eyes.
Yeah. The visual system. More reliable, I would say, than the vestibular system. What's one of the things that the vestibular system can trick you? One of the ways.
If you establish yourself into any sort of maneuver and it's like a constant rate turn, your hairs on the inside will eventually stop moving.
The liquid will stop moving.
The liquid will stop moving. Inner ear basically then is telling you, hey, you're straight and level. Or you're.
What do you do in this case?
Trust your instruments.
Trust your instruments. That's right. Always trust your instruments, unless they're not working. But you have more than one instrument that will really tell you what is going on. How do you get into these kind of troubles where you have to trust your instruments? What are some situations where this could happen to you as a private pilot?
I mean, night flying.
Night flying?
Right. Could be a big one.
Yeah. Especially night flying in an area that has no points around, right?
Right. Yeah. Or I guess potentially flying over water.
Flying over water.
Could be another
big one. Yep. What else?
I mean, you don't plan to fly into clouds, but...
There you go. That's number one, though.
Yeah.
That's the number one killer is people that inadvertently fly into low visibility. Clouds is one thing. Fog could be another one.
Yeah.
Or low reduced visibility situation. Those are definitely very difficult. Let's talk about some specific illusions that can be caused by the inner ear.
Specific illusions?
Yeah. Like
the names of the illusions?
Yeah. How about I give you the name of the illusion and you tell me what they are?
Okay.
The leans.
That's where you are leaning to try to stay with what your body is thinking is straight and level, but the aircraft is actually straight and level. So you're flying like this. Yes?
Yeah.
No?
Ish. Off. Kind of. It's related. Typically what happens is that, remember you mentioned it where the liquid stabilizes where you establish into a turn. And now you go back to wings level. And now you feel like you're in a turn again.
And then
what do you do in this case?
You're going to try to
you're going to try to correct it with
Correct
your
it.
hand so that your brain feels good.
Mm-hmm.
Coriolis illusion.
I don't remember this one.
It's very related to that one. Quick head movement that makes you feel like the airplane is going into a different...
Yes, this is the one where you were saying in the course that you have students pick up a pen or a pencil from the floor, and it completely throws them off.
And then I drop my pen, and then the student has to pick it up. As soon as you do this,
you feel like you're
moving. If you're under the hood and you're just looking at instrument, that will mess you up very quickly. So, and these are things that I'm not trying to be mean to the student. These are things that can happen in real life. That will happen in real life. Graveyard spiral. Sounds really appealing.
The graveyard spiral and spin, right? Potentially subsequent spin.
Yep.
And this is where you establish yourself into a turn and you don't realize that you're in a turn. So you keep making the turn tighter and tighter.
That's the result of what we talked about before. Right?
Yeah.
The result of correcting.
Yes.
And then as you do this, you're going to keep pulling.
Yep.
And then, just go. If you keep pulling, you'll
induce a spin. Then your inner ear, again, is stopping. And so when you perform the maneuver to come out of the spin, you're going to feel like you're starting a spin, and you're going to perform the maneuver again and induce a second spin. Yeah,
recovering from the spin makes it feel like you've turned the other direction. How about the somatographic illusion that's related to the somatographic system that we talked about with acceleration?
Oh, you're going to feel like you're accelerating when you're not?
No. When you accelerate, what happens? Think about you're in a car and you're in my Tesla, right?
Okay.
You accelerate real fast. What does it feel like?
It feels like you're being thrown against the seat.
And it feels like, what's that sensation that you would get in an airplane? How would you get that sensation in an airplane? When you climb, it kind of sticks you to the seat.
Yeah.
That's because of that movement. So that movement creates a movement of liquid in your ear, which makes it feel like you're climbing. And same thing when you decelerate, it feels like you're descending. So that's the idea. That's that kind of illusion. How about the inversion illusion?
I mean, I can take a guess.
Yeah.
That you feel like you're inverted.
How about the elevator illusion?
That's the up or down draft making you feel like you're climbing or descending much more than you actually are.
Yeah, this will happen, especially if you're under the hood. That's not good. All of this is all related to the vestibular system, right? This thing in your ear that has the three canals. What about some visual illusions? When your eyes are trying to trick you.
False horizon.
False horizon. I talk about that in the course.
Yep. That's where you have a set of bright lights, whether they're stars or a road or something. I think your example was a cloud bank where you associate that with the horizon and you orient visually based on that without referencing your instruments. And then you realize later, hopefully you realize later, that, maybe you were flying in a descent there towards the ground or you were at an angle or...
Yeah. This type of illusion is very difficult to get rid of because it's your eyes lying to you.
Yes.
Right? If it's your brain lying to you, eventually when you do enough maneuvers, it will kind of go back to normal, that liquid. But now it's your eyes lying to you and you're not used to not trusting your eyes. So I remember that one example, I was a student pilot and coming back towards the east coast of Florida, flying west to east. And then it's Florida, so it's always hazy because it's so humid. And of course, in the distance was the ocean. And there was a bank of clouds that was just sloped enough. It's not like you're going to be training at 45, so you're not going to feel it. It's going to be 5 degrees, off or a few degrees off of bank. And to just get that corrected, it feels like you're like this, you almost have to turn your head because that's how it feels like you're flying. You feel like you're just banking the opposite direction. And then after a while, your brain gets used to it again and you use different references or you look to the side and it really helps. But that one will mess you up. How about autokinesis?
That is that again at night, if you stare at a bright object, it'll appear to move in the distance.
Have you experienced that?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
It's trippy.
It's very trippy. It's kind of freaky, When I initially learned about that at the university, one of the first times I went like stargazing after that, I was like intentionally staring at things to see. And
it will do it. Drones, when we fly drones and you have to look at your drone in the distance at night, it will definitely do that. What about the thing called featureless terrain? Remember that one?
I don't remember that one.
I talk about an approach in Florida that we used to fly to at night, which was on the water. The runway was off on the water, Merritt Island, Florida. KCOI. So what's featureless?
Basically, you have minimal references outside because it's all dark, or maybe it's, I don't know, glassy water, maybe
Mhm.
an example if you were flying a float plane or something like that,
Mhm.
where you don't really have anything to judge, how high am I, how fast am I going,
Yep.
anything like that.
Yeah, very, very difficult. Snow-covered will also do that, actually,
Yeah,
in some cases.
makes sense.
Visual illusion. Now we have optical illusion, which is slightly different. So visual illusion is just a reference that kind of messes you up, or no reference that kind of messes you up. Optical illusion is really your brain playing tricks on you with, let's say, runway width illusion. So can you explain how the runway width kind of affects your performance?
So if you're used to a particular runway width, like I'm sure that when we start flying that I'll get used to one of the runways or the runways at Prescott. And so then going to somewhere else, if it's a wider runway, you're going to try to keep that same sight picture, right?
You're going to have a tendency to fly
higher
so
because
that
you want that same sight picture, basically.
you want that wide runway to look slimmer. And then the opposite is true,
right?
Which is more than likely what will happen to you because you're going to learn to fly at a bigger airport. And then all of a sudden you go to a small airport and then you're going to want to make that runway look the same, which means you're going to fly
lower.
And that's far more dangerous, obviously, because of the approach. How about the slope of the runway? Let's say an up-sloping runway. What does an up-sloping runway look like? If you were to compare it to a wide runway or a narrow runway, how does an up-sloping runway look?
It's going to look wider.
Wider.
Yeah.
So then at that point, the symptoms are the same. It's like you're going to a wider runway, so you're going to want to make it look
smaller.
So
you're going to land further down the runway
because your approach was
higher.
Yes. And then a downsloping runway looks like
it's going to appear thinner, and so you have a higher chance of
potentially hitting something.
Yeah. Hitting something or landing before the runway.
What about haze and fog? How does that affect your vision and your decision making?
Haze and fog make objects appear further away than they actually are.
Yes.
So
how do you deal with that?
Recognize it.
Yeah. I have a story with haze and fog, which grounded me for many, many weeks because I didn't want to fly after that. But we had a near midair in a Piper Seminole because it was hazy outside and we just couldn't see other traffic. And since then, my personal rule is if it's less than 5 statute mile visibility, I'm not flying. Not VFR at the very least.
Yeah.
And because it happened so quickly. There was another Seminole and we saw the pilot's eyes, like their wing, the tip of their wing was 3 feet on top of our wing, the middle of our wing.
Wow.
So within, several feet, it would have been. If they weren't higher than we would have clipped the wings and I wouldn't be here today. So very scary stuff. Haze and fog, don't mess with it. Don't underestimate how poorly visibility is. Even if you can see big buildings in the distance, it doesn't mean that you'll be able to see.
So you're not looking for a big building.
A small object. Yeah. It is very scary. Of course, this was pre-ADSB and ADSB would have likely helped, but who knows? That's very scary. How do you prevent spatial disorientation? If your senses can lie to you, then what's the best way to avoid all of that?
Recognition.
Yep.
Is I think a huge part of it is recognizing like, man, something's not right. And then just, you need to focus on the instruments and not take into account anything other than what your instruments are telling you.
What about picking up your pen? What about reducing the amount of head movement?
Reducing the amount of
if you're flying
changes that you're making.
Yeah. If you're flying in IMC, just try to keep your head level, straight. Don't do abrupt movement. Don't do all these things that will cause your brain to be even more confused. Train to fly by looking at just the instruments. That's very important. You're going to be doing this in your private pilot training where you have to go under the hood or using the foggles. Don't cheat.
Yeah.
That's the one place where you don't want to cheat.
You're only cheating yourself.
You're only cheating yourself because the day that you need it, you're going to be like, crap, I wish that I had done all of this. So we've talked about how illusions can trick a pilot into thinking that the airplane is doing something that it's not. But even without the illusions, our eyes have some natural limitations, right?
Yep.
especially at night. So let's start with how vision actually works. Our eyes rely on two types of receptors, which are
Rods and cones.
rods and cones. And so what's the difference between the two? Let's start with the rods.
So rods are your peripheral vision,
Yes.
and they're your night vision, basically,
Mhm.
right?
They're used at night. I mean, they're used during the day as well to like
Right.
see these things, but they're not great at details, right? If you're trying to see your finger here,
Mm-hmm.
it's there.
Yeah.
There's something, but
Yes.
it's not like great detail. But this vision right here has all the details. What is this vision right here?
That's your cones.
That's your cones. Okay. And the cones do what else? They do details
color.
and colors.
Yeah.
So that's why when you are flying at night, you typically rely more on your rods than your cones. Why?
Because they're more sensitive to light.
More sensitive. How much more sensitive?
10,000 times more
10,000
sensitive.
times more sensitive. So this is actually a fascinating thing about the human vision. If you ever want to test it at night, turn off the lights, acclimate to the dark.
Mm-hmm.
At first, you'll only be able to see things sideways. So let's say that we had this camera right here at night in my bedroom, and I just turn off the lights and I'm trying to walk around. I'm going to do this with my eyes, right? But that's because that's the only way that you can see. If you have something right in front of your face, unless it's really close and unless it's lit, you probably won't be able to see it. So when I walk at night, I know this. So I'm kind of like, moving and looking to the side to see what I can get.
Mm-hmm.
Over time, what do we have?
The rods adjust to the dark,
Yep.
and you get kind of your night vision, which is still better in your peripheral.
So at night, what happens is that the rods get to maximum sensitivity pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But the cones in the central vision are going to take a little bit longer to get to maximum sensitivity. That's about 30 minutes. After about 15 so minutes, they're about equal. And then that's when the cones start to take over. After 30 minutes, you're good to go. Your central vision is a lot more. It's not a lot more, but it's a lot more usable
Mm-hmm.
that you can use it. So dark adaptation is very important, and you can see that at night. Like I said, if you wait long enough, like 30 minutes sitting in bed, you'll be able to see objects a lot more easily without having to use your peripheral vision.
Mm-hmm.
So why is that important for us as pilots?
We need to be able to see things outside the airplane.
Yes, we do.
So we need to be able to see things inside the airplane too.
What precautions do we have to take at night?
We need to protect our night vision.
Yeah. How do you do that?
Use red lights.
You use red lights. Why is red light that much better?
Because of the wavelength of red light.
Okay.
So it's a less energetic wavelength.
It doesn't start the process of bleaching your retina. When you bring bright lights,
Mm-hmm.
it bleaches your retina and it starts that process again of dark adaptation. So white light is not good for that. Red light is a lot better because it's a different wavelength. In theory, the human eye is better at seeing green lights.
Mm-hmm.
So in theory, green light would be even better, but it doesn't react with our sectional chart nearly as well. So I think historically we've been using red because that is better on the sectional chart.
Mm-hmm.
Although that is questionable if you fly out west because there's a lot of red already on the thing. So if you use a red filter on the red light, on the red paper, it makes it very weird, right? So
Yep.
yeah, so we use a different colored light. And what else do we need to be careful of at night?
Other than not bleaching our...
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Not
No,
bleaching.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're using the red lights so that we don't do that.
Yeah, and not staring at bright lights
Mm-hmm.
anywhere. So red lights in the cockpit, red lights when you do your pre-flight, and then not using any bright lights. I also tell people, and that's somewhat controversial to some, but to wear sunglasses as you get into the building at the airport. You go for your flight,
Mm-hmm.
just put sunglasses on before you start going outside because it's going to reduce the amount of white light that you're getting into your retina, and it's going to start that dark adaptation process. Not fully. Now make sure that you don't trip on things when you go outside. As soon as you go outside, take them off and then use your red light to navigate, but it will help that process. Don't use them outside. That's not good. So knowing what we know about limitations of vision at night, how would you scan for traffic at night?
Use the peripherals and look for movement primarily.
Mm-hmm. Would you just like...
No, you need
this?
to... I think the FAA guidance is 10 degrees at a time for 2 to 3 seconds.
Yes. Look here, wait for movement.
Mhm.
Look here, wait for movement. Yeah, movement is going to be, if the object is lit, it can be fairly easy to see.
Yep.
But yeah, that's you should do it in section. You should do that during the day as well. So one more factors that affects vision a lot that most pilots don't really think about is oxygen. If your body doesn't have enough oxygen, then vision is going to be one of the first things to go. What is it called when the body doesn't have enough oxygen?
Hypoxia.
Hypoxia. Okay. What are some of the symptoms of hypoxia?
Tunnel vision.
Tunnel vision
is a big one.
Yeah.
But
that's my number one.
I was going to say the other ones vary based on person, but by person, right?
They all depends on the person. Yes.
So loss of color in your vision, or more muted colors, deliriousness, where you're just
euphoria.
Yep, euphoria. Pass out eventually.
Pass out.
So,
what about your cognitive abilities?
Oh, it's decreasing as you become more and more hypoxic.
Yep. Confusion, poor judgment.
Yep.
What about hands? Anything on the hands that you could see?
They may turn blue.
Yeah.
Like your lips do.
Headaches is also one that some people can get.
Yeah.
So for me, you've done the testing in the chamber. So what did you get? We did the chamber at Oshkosh as a test.
I got the loss of color vision, and I didn't realize it until I put the mask on, and it was just like the world was there again almost, you know? The other one I got was my entire scalp felt like it was like all at once on fire.
On fire. I remember you saying that.
Not burning painful, but like if you've ever held your hand close to a fire or a heat gun or a blowtorch or anything like that, where it's like not hot, hot.
And that was before you put the mask on?
And that was when I put the mask on.
Oh, when you put the mask on.
When I felt that, I was like, I'm not cool with this. And I put the mask on after that. So I only had 2 symptoms there because I was like, I don't like this.
No.
I'm done, you know?
Yeah, mine is tunnel vision. And then my head feels like some pressures. It's not I don't know if it's a headache. They probably call it a headache, but it feels different than a headache.
Fuzzy almost.
Yeah, it's just, you just feel, I don't know. It's hard to describe, but it's very, very specific. So every time I've done it, it's been kind of those symptoms, one before the other sometimes. But if you have the ability to do it, do a high altitude chamber test and then find what your symptoms are, because more than likely, those are the ones that you're going to get.
Right. And they don't change over the course of your life, right?
No, typically they stay the same. So unless you have some major changes in health or whatever, they're going to be mostly the same. So we have different types of hypoxia. The first one is called Hypoxic Hypoxia.
It's hypoxia due to altitude.
Due to altitude. So what happens there? What happens to oxygen levels as we get to a higher elevation?
Oxygen levels don't change.
Okay, great.
But you are getting less oxygen because you're getting less air.
Why are you getting a smaller volume of air?
Because, right? The atmosphere it's all gravity fed air basically, right?
Yeah.
So there's more air, higher pressure at the bottom.
There's more pressure
lower
at
pressure
the bottom,
at the
less
top.
pressure at the top. Okay. So let's dig a little deeper there. Less pressure at the top means what? How do we get oxygen into our body?
We inhale.
We inhale. How do we inhale?
The diaphragm creates a lower pressure in the lungs and
key right there, lower pressure. Okay. So it's a pressure differential. That's what your lungs do. Your diaphragm pushes on it, and then it or pulls on it, pushes to get the air in and out. And it's a differential pressure. As the pressure decreases outside,
there's less of a differential.
There's less of a delta. And that is what makes it impossible. That's why when I first moved here from Florida at 5,000 feet elevation, you catch yourself every once in a while you do this because your body is not used to that kind of movement just yet. But that's what happens. So as you get to very high altitude, it takes a lot more effort to force your diaphragm to do more work to get that air into the lungs. And so if you get high enough, there's just not enough pressure differential that your diaphragm can create a lower pressure to suck air into your body, right? So that's why we have issues. Now, you mentioned correctly that as we get to a higher elevation, the volume of oxygen, the percentage of oxygen per volume is still the same, 21%. Yep. That happens at any altitude up until we get outside of Earth. So it's not necessarily the percentage of oxygen that's a problem. That's why we can survive in a commercial jet at 38, 40,000 feet, because what do?
Pressurize it.
We pressurize it. So we're helping humans create that differential pressure. If we lose pressurization, what do we have to do?
Put on the mask.
Put on the mask. So we keep humans alive with 2 different ways. By pressurizing air or by giving them extra oxygen. So at that stage, you have a more rich content of oxygen because that little bit of that you can bring in, and in most cases, it's also pressurized in the mask. So it's a double whammy. So, okay. That's important. The way that people get hypoxic, a lot of people don't understand how we even breathe in the first place. How does that stuff get in there? How do you fix hypoxic hypoxia?
Pressure?
Yeah.
Or oxygen?
Yeah. Okay. You know where I'm going next with this. What's the rules for using supplemental oxygen? In an unpressurized airplane, I need to add.
Okay. I'm going to get the passengers out of the way first.
Yep.
Because there's separate rules for pilots and passengers.
Yep.
Passengers have to be provided supplemental oxygen above 15,000 feet.
Yes. Provided is a key word.
Yes. They don't have to use it. They just have to be provided it.
Yep.
Pilots above 12,500 have to use supplemental oxygen if you're going to fly at that altitude or higher for more than 30 minutes. And then you have to use it above 14,000.
Yep. So 12,500 to 14,000, 30 minutes or more. It's cumulative.
Yes. Yeah.
So you can't just go up to there and then come back down and go back up. So cumulative. So that's the regulation. At what altitude does the FAA recommend that you use supplemental oxygen?
10,000 during the day and 5,000 at night.
So here we fly at...
We live
at 5,000 feet elevation, so you should be using it. Have you ever used oxygen at night?
Yes. We went on one of our drone trips to Colorado. We used some supplemental oxygen when we were at that drone show.
Yep.
We had some there, but we bought it in the park up there at 12,500.
Yep.
So a couple of the guys weren't feeling great, and I was like, just going to take it slow. And they were,
yeah,
they were going,
that.
And then seeing how far they could run before it started to
it doesn't
kick
last
in,
very
and
long.
then
it doesn't last very long. At night, it's actually quite amazing to, if you have a can of oxygen and you're flying pretty high up, it's like somebody turned on the lights. Just like what you said when you saw the chart and the colors changing. It's the same, but with the brightness of the lights. It almost feels like somebody turned up
the saturation.
The adjustment. So, okay, so the next one is called Hypemic Hypoxia.
And that is like anemia or other blood disorders or carbon monoxide.
Carbon monoxide, yeah. Carbon monoxide does what to our body?
It attaches to our blood cells, basically.
The red blood cells, yeah.
And prevents oxygen from getting in there.
Yeah. The analogy that I give in the course is that your red blood cells are like the little bus that carries oxygen, right, to all your different body parts. It's like the carbon monoxide is hijacking the bus and taking all the seats, and then oxygen can't go in there. What's the difficulty with carbon monoxide?
It's not easily expelled from the body.
Yeah, it's hard to get rid of. So how do we get carbon monoxide even in the first place in the airplane?
It could be introduced because of an issue with the engine and or heater system.
Yep. What happens with a heater?
If the exhaust fractures, it could bleed carbon monoxide into the fresh air.
Why do we even use exhaust and the heater? How does that
work? To
work?
warm the air for cabin heat.
Ah, so we use the heat from the muffler, from the outside of the muffler.
From the outside, yes.
Heat. Okay. What if we have oxygen available and the blood can actually carry it, but it's not getting to where it needs to go?
That could be stagnant hypoxia.
Stagnant hypoxia, what is that?
It's hypoxia caused by G-forces.
G-forces.
So it's causing the blood to pool somewhere, basically, because...
Where's somewhere?
Generally your legs.
Yes, your legs. Where do we need blood?
Everywhere.
Yeah.
But primarily your head.
In your head, in your brain, right? So reduce flow to the brain, which is not good. You could probably walk really fast because you have a lot of blood in your feet, but it's about
Not for long.
Not for long. What's the symptoms of that? How do you know?
I mean, everything is going to feel heavy and your brain is going to pretty quickly start to get that tunnel vision. It's very, very quick onset hypoxia.
And then how can we prevent that other than not getting into these kind of G-forces, high G maneuvers?
Wear a G-suit if you have to.
So not something that you will do,
no,
but something that is available. Last one. What if we have oxygen available, but the blood can carry it and then circulation is fine, but the body cannot use it properly?
That's histotoxic, right?
Histotoxic, yep.
Yeah, and that's due to illness or a poison of some sort in the body.
Yep, what kind of poison?
Probably carbon monoxide then.
A human-made poison?
A human-made poison.
That you ingest?
Oh, alcohol.
Yeah. Or drugs.
Or drugs, yeah.
Or like toxin, possibly. So what does that do? It's kind of the same thing that we talked about before. Just your body is not able
effectively move oxygen.
1 ounce of alcohol is the equivalent to being 2,000 feet higher in altitude. So, not good. We always talk about hypoxia. There's another thing that can also happen in the airplane that is related to breathing. Maybe breathing fast.
Hyperventilation.
Hyperventilation. Okay. So how is that different?
You're not balancing the right amount of each air molecule in your system.
The gases.
The
in your
gases,
system.
yeah.
Yep. What can trigger hyperventilation?
Extreme stress.
Stress. Yeah. Remember the guy that we listened to? Mayday, mayday, mayday.
Yeah.
And he's just screaming.
He's just screaming it over
He's
and over
not
and over.
eventually hyperventilating, but you feel like this is
Yeah.
something that could absolutely happen.
Mm-hmm.
So stress, anxiety, something going on in the cockpit. What are some of the symptoms?
I mean, it's similar to hypoxia. You're
Mhm.
just not, almost in a different direction, if you will. You know, you could still get tunnel vision, you could pass out, you're going to have a loss of, you know, your control and decision making is going to be affected, and
Yep. What do you do if that's what you're getting?
you need to slow down your breathing.
Yeah. You need to calm down. Talk out loud is
Yes.
the one thing that they say. Now, the FAA used to say that you need to do one thing.
They still say
They still say that's true. They still say it.
They still
but you
say it.
shouldn't do that. It's been proven to
breathe
be.
into a paper bag or a bag of some sort.
Yeah, breathe into a bag.
We've had many people in our courses say this is wrong.
Yeah, we know it's wrong. Unfortunately, I'm pretty sure there are still questions in the FAA database
There
that
are.
have it, and so
Yep, there are.
we mention it with an asterisk now. The last thing that I like to cover with this is related to you go vacationing, you go to the Caribbean on vacation, and you decide that you're going to go scuba diving before you go back for your flight the next day. Why is that not such a good idea?
You could get the bends.
The bends. What's the bends?
It's nitrogen bubbles in your bloodstream, which can cause your blood to stop flowing, and
Why does it happen?
pressure differential. Like it's a sudden change in pressure, basically. So you're breathing pressurized air as a scuba diver, right? And when you go up really fast and then potentially get in an airplane and go up even faster,
Mhm.
those molecules are going to bubble,
Mhm.
and then that bubbling is bad. It can happen under your skin. It can happen in your blood veins. It can.
What's something that people do on a regular basis that looks just like that? That can help explain what happens inside of your body. Remember what I mentioned in the course?
Say it's like a can of soda.
A can of soda, right?
Mhm.
You have it's all about the pressure and the volume. And there's a relationship between if you multiply pressure by volume on one side and you multiply pressure by volume, they're equal.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have this can of Coke that has a high pressure and a small volume.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as you open this up quickly, now you're changing the pressure from high to lower.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, the volume has to increase because
Yes.
those two are equal, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that volume all of a sudden blows up. And so that's what happens potentially in your skin. And now, because your skin is somewhat sealed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those bubbles are going to get trapped underneath your skin. And that can create, then there's different levels of discomfort, from discomfort all the way to
Death.
death, because that nitrogen is not something that your body needs or has or is used to or can really deal with. It can get into your heart and into your brain, and then that can be deadly. So it's going to have a tendency to go into joints, and then it can be a little painful. So you have to be very careful. There are guidelines as to what you should do. Do you remember what the guideline is?
If you had an uncontrolled ascent, it's 12 hours before flying. If you had a controlled ascent, wait 24 hours before flying.
Why is it more when you have a controlled ascent?
Because you're going deeper,
You're
generally.
going deeper, technically, yeah.
And
And that's if you fly below 8,000 feet.
yeah, and then above 8,000 feet is 24 hours.
24 hours regardless. The aeromedical factors that we talked about today can really sneak up on you if you're not paying attention. Understanding how they affect you and how to deal with them can actually make a big difference between a safe flight and something more serious like an emergency. If you have any questions about any of the aeromedical factors that we talked about today, drop them in the comments and we'd love to hear from you. Also, if you want to go even more in depth into these topics, check out the private pilot course and the instrument rating course that we have available. Jason, I give you a B+ on that one. I guess you are fit to fly after all. And thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next episode of The Flying New Guy.